Hey, how's it going, y'all? Pete here. It is Friday, about 10 a.m. East Coast, July 25th. I just wanted to mention a situation that I think really underscores the lack of accountability that's built in, that's inherent in the police institutions as they're today structured. So to do that, it's something that I've often referred to. I often say these incidents being aggression against a person by somebody else who's not held accountable, or at least held accountable to the same standards as might you or I if we did a similar act. Uh, that aggressor's not held accountable to the same standards because they have a badge on, and that's really the reason that cop block exists. Badges don't grant extra rights. It's a very simple concept, but it has far-reaching implications. If you do think that that makes sense, that badges don't grant extra rights, that a person can't be given more rights based on their title, then that really disempowers the current structure of the police institutions, which exist on a double standard. Everybody who works for a police outfit says, I have the right to steal money from people in my community to then protect them. And that doesn't make sense to me, and it sets the foundation that's built on double standards and coercion. So if you allow someone else the right to steal from you or your neighbors to then protect you, what incentive do they have to actually be accountable or to not violate your rights or our rights on a systemic level? And that's really, again, why I say these incidents will continue to happen until they don't. And the surest way to have them not continue to happen is not by petitioning these people who claim extra rights to treat us fairly, but instead to recognize that they're people and that they have no extra rights. So if they do something that's wrong for you or me, it's just as wrong for them. And thus, to delegitimize their institutions that are based on force and that are based on fear and double standards. So, just one example to point to that really underscores this relates to the Chris Dorner manhunt that happened in early February of 2013. Yesterday a story was shared on the Daily Breeze, and so about this incident, and so I'm going to read that and maybe just share some comments and just leave it at that. But uh, let's see here. I'm going to go to the screen share now, and hopefully you can read this as well. So this was posted yesterday to the Daily Breeze by a gentleman named Larry Altman, and it says, Torrance to pay $1.8 million to settle surfer David Perdue's lawsuit in mistaken Christopher Dorner shooting. So if you were at all paying attention to this incident and this whole manhunt that was going on in Southern California, you're probably aware of this incident in which a police employee vehicle, it was driven by a gentleman named Brian McGee. He saw this black Nissan Ridgeline, drove at it. You could see it with such force that it knocked the rear axle off the truck, and then fired 3 shots into the truck. One of the shots went through the driver's side window and out the windshield, narrowly missing the driver of that vehicle, who was named David Perdue. And he's just he was down in Redondo Beach area. He was surfing, and or had been, I guess, down at the beach and drove by. And this situation. So anyway, just look at how this is titled, Torrance. So first of all, who's Torrance? It says the city of Torrance. So what does that mean? Who's the city of Torrance? Is it the taxpayers? Is it people in the community that the Torrance PD claims to protect? And then they're going to say, oh, some of our people messed up, therefore you have to pay for their mistakes. How does that make any sense? Does it mean that does it disincentivize police employees from just randomly shooting up other vehicles in the future? I don't really think so, but I'll go ahead and read this and just share some thoughts as we go, try to keep the pace moving. So it says, the city of Torrance will pay $1.8 million to a Redondo Beach surfer who was mistakenly shot at by police officers during the manhunt for rogue LA police officer Christopher Dorner, officials announced Thursday. So, though so it's interesting that the shooters' names aren't yet mentioned, and again, this writer is choosing to call certain people officials. And if you grant, again, this goes back to this perceived double standard. if you grant somebody else a title of official or authority, then it just sets the stage to believe that they have more legitimacy or have the right to do things that other people can't do. So I would strongly encourage you to not use those types of that verbiage, officials or authorities, just arbitrarily. So it continues. The agreement settles David and Lizetta Purdue's lawsuit against the city and its police department, ending the acrimonious battle over what occurred that chaotic week in February 2013. Officers ran Purdue's truck, thinking he was Dorner, fleeing a shooting, then fired 3 shots at him. Although the settlements admit no fault, Torrance Police Chief Mark Matsuda said Thursday the shooting was a mistake from the standpoint that we ended up shooting at somebody who we thought it was. Really? I mean, so you're not going to admit a mistake. So anyway, let me continue before I keep weighing in. They were trying to protect the community and were proactively going out there thinking that this is the guy who was armed, who had been using assault rifles. Matsuda said, there is not a great way to try to engage somebody like that. For them to decide to use their car to intervene and take that action, it took a lot of courage to do that. That's where we get to the totality of everything that occurred before that led them to that point, and then it turned out not to be him. Okay, so continuing on. Della Thompson Bell, an attorney for the city of Torrance, said paying attorney's fees up to $1 million for a federal jury trial factored into this decision to settle. Federal court records showed Purdue's attorney, Robert Sheenhan, filed a notice to dismiss the lawsuit in U.S. District Court in Los Angeles shortly before 1 p.m. Thursday. The Purdue family wishes to thank the City of Torrance and the attorneys for the City of Torrance for the work in getting this matter resolved and for their thorough professionalism at all times, Sheenhan said. Since filing the lawsuit, Sheehan had sought an amount similar to what the City of Los Angeles paid to each of the 2 newspaper carriers who came under fire from Los Angeles police officers just moments before the Torrance police shooting. Each woman received $2.1 million. One of them was wounded. Torrance originally offered Purdue 500,000 Federal Reserve notes, which Sheehan said was unacceptable. Purdue, 39, alleged in the lawsuit that Officer Brian McGee nearly killed him on February 7, 2013, when McGee and his partner, Officer Aaron Super, rammed his truck and fired 3 shots at him on Flagler Lane near Beryl Street. The bullets went through the driver's side window of Purdue's Honda Ridgeline, narrowly missing him, and then struck his windshield. Purdue, on his way to pick up a friend, had driven into the confusion surrounding the search for Dorner, a fired LAPD Harbor Division officer who vowed in an online manifesto to take revenge on the families of the LAPD officers who fired him. Dorner had already killed a police officer's daughter and her boyfriend in Irvine, and that morning shot a Riverside County police officer to death and wounded another. Torrance police officers were well aware that one of Dorner's targets, a high-ranking LAPD official, lived on Red Beam Avenue, and that LAPD officers had taken positions there to protect him and his family. Purdue was in his truck around the block when 8 LAPD officers mistakenly opened fire on 2 newspaper carriers in a Toyota Tacoma they believed were Dorner approaching the house. One woman was hit in the back. Seeing Purdue's truck around the block and hearing the shots, McGee and Super believed Dorner was headed towards them. They rammed the truck and McGee fired 3 shots. Dorner was actually miles away in his gray Nissan Titan. He was killed 5 days later in a gun battle with San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputies in Big Bear, apparently of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. 2 deputies were shot during the exchange, one fatally. And I guess I'll stop right here. There's a lot of other thoughts on how Dorner's demise was brought about, and in fact there was some audio that was later leaked from the people that were outside this cabin that Dorner was at that included the passage, let's light it up or let's burn it down or something to that effect. So so I guess I would just encourage you to question what this official scenario actually is, or what is claimed to be, because it doesn't really mesh in my mind. But to continue on, in Purdue's lawsuit, he alleged he suffered head and spinal injuries and could no longer serve, lift his children, or work as a baggage handler at Los Angeles International Airport. From the start, Torrance police officials did not call the shooting a mistake, but said it was a result of a confluence of events that surrounded it. Officers knew Dorner had previously scouted the officer's house under protection on Red Beam Avenue, that he killed a police officer and wounded another in Riverside County early that morning, and heard a report, later determined to be inaccurate, that Dorner was headed west on the 105 freeway toward the South Bay. Matsuda said at least 4 officers involved in the incident that morning received special training afterwards. Gradually, other officers in the department are undergoing training to learn what to do in similar situations. In a statement, the department said, police officers have reviewed our tactics, police officials have reviewed our tactics, trainings, procedures, and any decision-making which potentially impacted our performance during this incident. Super is now serving as a school resource officer. McGee was assigned to the department's communications bureau following the shooting. Matsuda said it was in McGee's and the public's best interest to assign him to work in the 911 dispatch center, but he will eventually return to patrol. He has a lot of time left in his career, Matsuda said. The district attorney's office announced in January that neither officer acted criminally, saying that the shooting occurred during an atmosphere of fear and extreme anticipation, and that the shooting was a reasonable mistake. Prosecutors are still reviewing the actions of the LAPD officers, said a spokesman for the district attorney's office. Okay, so where to start? There's clearly lots of double standards here. I mean, I would encourage you, when you read this story, or when you think about similar stories, replace officer whoever, in this case Brian McGee, with Joe Smith, who lived down the block. And would the actions be treated the same if you and I, no matter what tense situation may or may not exist in the area, but if you and I drove down the street and we saw a vehicle, would we be justified in ramming it and opening fire on it? I think not. And to say that these, for the police employee's colleague, Mr. Matsuda, to say that their next steps are to better train their people, and that this guy has a lot of time left in his career. I mean, that's pretty ridiculous that someone can just open fire and almost take the life of another person and not really face any repercussions at all. And it's just an example of the people that work for these institutions seeking to protect the institution first and foremost, rather than the people that they claim to protect. And note that Dorner was said to have been driving a gray Nissan Titan, which is a pickup truck. And in this case, the vehicle that was opened fire on was black, and it was a Ridgeline, which it's different than the vehicle that they supposedly had been looking for. And also, nearby it was mentioned that 8 LAPD employees opened fire on the 2 women who were driving another vehicle, which again didn't match the description at all. So anyway, this is a ridiculous situation, and it just to underscore that these police employees, he said it took a lot of courage. It took a lot of courage to take that action. So this is like the police chief is just standing by this absurd action and trying to mitigate any pushback or any rational viewing of the situation by dressing up the action and saying that it was a tense situation and that these police employees were courageous, and all these other distractions. And the article itself repeated a couple times the same information that these other people had been supposedly aggressed upon in the morning. It repeated that information twice, and it ended with saying that essentially the police employees are on the case and taking steps to make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen again. But again, these kind of situations will continue to happen again, because the individual shooters, Brian McGee and Aaron Soper, Brian McGee was the shooter, Aaron Soper was there as well. They face no repercussions. If you or anyone else were to just open fire on a vehicle and to purposefully crash into a vehicle, I think you would probably face some repercussions, and rightly so. So it's ridiculous that these people at Torrance Police Outfit think that the misdeeds of themselves, of Mr. McGee and Miss Soper, should be made to bear on the community, on the folks that they claim to serve and protect. But again, it's not surprising of this lack of personal responsibility, because that is what's built into these institutions. Again, the police claim a legitimate right to initiate force, and they claim such legal fictions as acting under color of law or sovereign immunity. So they say, well, when I have this costume on, you can't hold me to the same standards as if I didn't have this costume on. So I would encourage you to think about that and think about the ramifications if you do want to stop these sorts of incidents, stop trying to pander to these criminal outfits, and instead recognize the inherent double standards within them and withdraw your consent. Don't rely on them. Let's work to communicate and de-escalate and be responsible for our actions, and call these kind of things out. I mean, I don't know where this Brian McGee guy lives, but I know if I were his neighbor and I knew that he had opened fire on someone without cause, I think I would probably let him know that I didn't feel that doesn't sit well with me, and I know if I was a parent and I had a kid in the school where this Aaron Soper police employee now works, I'd definitely make clear to that person that, based on their past history and the lack of accountability that they faced for being involved in this type of action, I would definitely make clear that I don't feel comfortable with them in that environment. And I would hope if I had kids out there, I definitely wouldn't have them in government schools anyway, because that's just an indoctrination center that, again, tells these kids, if you see an issue, you see a problem, like, defer to authorities, and you can trust authorities, you can trust this person in a costume, but you can't trust anybody else. Don't talk to strangers unless they have a costume on. But then it's these people with these costumes on who claim double standards that are the ones that are inflicting the institutionalized violence that we see and that we'll continue to see as long as their institutions exist. And these institutions exist, just to be clear, only because people buy into them. If but anyway, I don't want to keep repeating myself. I want to keep this short. I just feel sort of passionate about this. If you've not already seen it, there's a video called "Want to End Police Brutality: Focus on the Institution." And so if you've not yet seen that, it's included in the video description, or you could just search for it. Just search for "Focus on the Institution," cop block, or police, and it should show up. But and again, I would hope that anybody that works at the Torrance police outfit that doesn't agree with how this all panned out, if they know that it doesn't make sense, that it doesn't foster justice, then I would encourage them to speak out and break ranks, or any other police employee anywhere when they to break ranks and to speak out, and because if this stuff continues, it's just going to widen this gulf of claimed rulers and ruled, and which won't have good consequences for anybody. So appreciate your time, and as my shirt says, strike the root. If you're not familiar with that concept, it's definitely one that I try to advocate. It says there are 1,000 hacking at the branches of tyranny to the one who's striking at the root, and I think it's definitely worth putting out there, because instead of just being reactive continuously to these sorts of incidents, we should recognize that this institution of policing, which is founded on coercion, cannot bring about a good outcome. And instead it just perpetuates an us versus them mentality, and really distorts the good intentions of peace and justice and accountability, and instead sets the stage for some very bad things, when people just do their job unthinkingly. But I guess that's it for now. But again, I feel if you're out in Torrance and you don't agree with this settlement, I encourage you just not to pay it. I mean, if you don't think that it's just, if you wouldn't pay for that type of service, if you don't, then why do you? So just some food for thought. Much love.